always one of those horror RPG maker games that stood out to me back then, back when I was going through a lot of these games, and it was likely because of the location that the game takes place in. But much like when I attempted to make a video about Eve some years back, I always found myself not having much to say. And perhaps that's because I had already experienced this game a long time ago. I always just sit down, play through it, and go, yeah, that's Eve. But hey, call it an investment, because now Eve got a remake. I didn't even know until I saw someone randomly speedrunning it, like, what? Eve got a remake? By the same creator too, nearly an exact decade from the original release, back in February of 2012, with the remake published in April of 2022. All these years later, going in, I was really curious what was going to be changed. I had my suspicions, but I wondered what new stuff would be added. So, sit around and let's have a little fun video where I introduced Eve to the newcomers, compare the original to the remake, and just give my overall thoughts on this game, because I'm sure a lot of you have been wondering about it. Because when I was younger, I really liked Eve, but now, all these years later of experiences, I'm not sure. And hopefully by the end of this video, I'll be able to make sense of it all. I'll be able to finally put my thoughts on this game into words. So, without further ado, let's enter the gallery. Eve tells the tale of a young girl named, well, Eve, visiting a small art gallery with her parents of a passed away niche artist known as Garantina, I don't know. One thing that always stuck out to me was the fact that this game notated that the sky was gray that day. I don't know why, but I feel like it adds a lot to the mood. So the beginning portion of this game takes place just walking around the gallery and looking at paintings and talking to people. Characters have unique sprites when they talk to Eve, turning towards her. I always appreciate all the different characters that can be seen here, varied and unique sprites. That was something I always loved about Eve. It rarely reuses anything. Of note of the people here are of course Eve's parents who took her here. I like how even the remake kept the dad's portrait of like slightly tilting his head down. And also this person here with purple hair, looking at a painting known as the Hangman. They don't have anything to say at the moment, but keep them in mind because that's the MVP. So for now with Eve, we can just walk around and see all the cool art, and read their titles as well. Even though Eve can't understand some of the words used in them, and they're thusly question marked out. The remake moves some of the displays around. Most noticeable to me is what they did to I guess I shouldn't say the name. But this big picture here now has its own dedicated room, which I think is sort of strange. Like, players know this painting is important, but having it put on a pedestal feels more like a nod to us, like, hey look there, look, it's the picture! Rather than in the original, when while it's got its own screen, it didn't involve a whole staircase up to it, like it's the main attraction of the gallery. In the original, it felt like it was a natural part of the gallery. But maybe there's some potential lore reasons why this new version might make sense. Regardless, upon interacting with this large painting, the game begins. The gallery is now empty, the painting seemingly coming to life. I made sure to wait here just to see the person walking by and slamming the window. And by entering one of the displays, we delve deeper into Guartina's art gallery, where we can see many more paintings from him. There was always a cool aspect to Eve in learning about Guartina through his artwork, from the symbolisms and interpretations potentially reflecting his life, to things such as how he rarely draws real people. It's kinda cool learning about the artists behind all of this throughout the journey. Like, we get to see a side that these small galleries can't display with justice. It's almost like we are the last few people learning his story and his life. Eve ends up finding a red rose, which becomes the life bar for the player. If it wilts, she too will wilt with it. As Eve takes damage, she'll have to restore her health at bases full of water, some of them being pretty limited to a certain amount of uses. For some reason though, the remake auto-saves like every room, so the fear of death isn't really present, but still, don't die I guess. The HUD to show this is more stylized than the remake, but something about seeing the PNG of the flower wilting in the original was more impactful for me. Like, it got kinda nervous seeing it like shriveled all up, compared to just seeing a meter go down. Alongside this face the painting here makes, which I find to be a lot more unsettling in the original. And I guess now would be a pretty good time to talk about a few of the comparisons I can make to the remake from the original. I was afraid that dirty art style to the original would be lost in the cleaner remake. People can say the original art was low quality or something, but I always found that style kinda distinct and artistic. These dark outlines and shadows was kind of what made Eve what it was to me, and not just more typical anime designs. Even the sprites really stood out. A lot of RPG Maker horror games would just use the default sprites that came with the maker that they were using, but Eve had these taller sprites, and I really liked this style, and moments where the sprites had these neat animations to them. It was clear that the creator of Eve, Curry, cares a lot about the art and style of the game, and I can say this was all translated somewhat well in the remake. The sprites are still great and have new animations with them. This I really like, but I think the dark, edgy sketchiness to the portraits was kinda lost. I still like how the new ones look. They probably look better in some ways, and in some ways I do prefer them. But there was something about the original that just stands out more to me. And when I think of Eve, that's the style I'm going to remember. I think Gary is a really good example of this in comparing his two portraits. What? Who's Gary? Oh, shoot. Okay, let's get back to the game. Now this is a classic Eve moment, reloading the game several times at the hide and seek portion. Some of y'all might not understand why I'm doing this, and oh, what poor innocent souls you all are. It's also nice that the cat sounds at this one part are no longer ear destroying. So at the current point of the game, we're sort of just exploring around and just trying to get the hell out of here, messing around with some of Guaratina's works and playing all these games. At one point Eve gets locked in a room and reads a story about Carrie Careless. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm actually surprised this made it into the remake. I don't know, I guess it's kind of relevant to one character, but it was always such a weird part to me. At least it's not buggy in this version. Through farther exploration, interacting with Guaratina's art, and well, to put it nicely, the art interacting with us, we find that purple-haired person from before collapsed. Here's a change I was expecting, altering the text to just touching rather than giving this dying dude a massage. That was a little odd in the original. But as Eve's life is connected to a red rose, we find this person's is connected to a blue rose, which we snag and heal up just in the nick of time, and now he's all better. This is Gary. And to people like me who actually care for the characters of this game, Gary is the goddamn best one in it. I'll talk more about the characters in a bit, but for now, Gary joins us in the shared goal of getting the hell out of here. A cool benefit of having Gary is that he can read all the words that Eve doesn't understand, so the player can go to places with Gary and learn the full titles of art pieces, which is required for 100%. The remake even adds a talk to Gary command, which is interesting. I actually went back and he does have lines for all the past rooms. And he doesn't just have lines for rooms, he has contextual lines for things that happen. There is a lot of new dialogue for Gary, and I think that's really cool. But it also does serve as a what do I do next or puzzle hint button, which is nice for people who need it. We do some more exploring through areas and cool puzzles with Gary, and eventually come across another character looking to escape, a little girl named Mary. That's weird. I don't remember seeing her in the intro sequence. And well, the three work together, somewhat, to survive and find an escape to Guaratina's gallery. This is where I'll stop the story talk, because the story can branch into several different paths based on player choices. And by player choices, I mean less by dialogue, more like actions the player does. Eve has always been kind of infamous for me with its hidden counters and doing things that don't entirely make sense just to have certain characters actually survive. And the funny RNG stuff that can just somehow end up killing characters. Like, for most people by this point, Gary's already doomed, and they don't even know it. No way is anyone saving Gary on their first playthrough, which I kinda like. If it was just obvious dialogue choices, then it would be less interesting. If the player wants Gary to survive, they gotta be smart and work for it. And that's always my kind of favorite thing. It's something I always liked about a game like Cave Story as well, and how what I deem to be the best ending requires playing the most and doing the most out of it. And it is legitimately challenging. But let's go more on with the remake changes. There's been really small layout changes overall, but also changes to puzzles. The original had a puzzle involving finding colored numbers and fitting them into an equation, but in the remake I just have to walk around and find saplings. I kind of preferred the original, as it was more the aspect of finding the puzzle pieces and putting them together. But the colored numbers weren't very colorblind friendly, so I can give it a pass. One of the rooms to attain a piece of the fish has been altered to now have a stool following Eve around, which is a lot more interesting than just Eve pushing a stool and jumping on it. This is definitely a point in making a room something that fits the quality of Eve more. Because one of the best aspects of Eve is interacting with Guertina's work, so I think changes like these are direct improvements. And it's always cool to see new sculptures added to the game. The gray area has probably received the most changes. It's nearly a new area. It's got new rooms, and the puzzle layout is completely changed, and it now revolves around getting a golden bird. There's been a removal of sections where the player has to navigate tight mazes with chases everywhere, and this is something I also expected to get changed, as it was always kinda clunky and prone to the player just getting Pac-Man'd. And it's nice to see these areas are now instead replaced with new puzzles, even if it means the headless sculptures are a lot less prevalent of a threat in this game. But maybe that's a good thing. The whole gallery needs to be threatening, not just a single entity in it. And the new puzzles are cool. I like this teacup puzzle. Always had a thing for these pushing puzzles, and the sounds that teacups make are oddly pleasing. Some more remake stuff is that normally the remake would have this control guide on the side, but I turned that off because it's needless UI clutter to me. I know the controls, but one thing the remake does add to the controls is this zoom in feature. Not entirely sure why it exists, but I think it's neat and harmless. I never used it in any particular scenario, but it was cool to zoom in at points. And in some ways it fits that theme of being at an art gallery and zooming in to get a better look at the art, which I like. I think that's cute. People really love the atmosphere of Eve. And I always like the idea of this being like a personal, even deeper tour of this lost, underrated artist. And how this game is like an evil version of a gallery visit, being chased by these paintings and sculptures, all while this calming piano music typically heard in these places still plays. Almost a dissonance between the two. But the player is still going around and looking at the art like a normal trip to the gallery, and in some ways seeing more value in it than ever. I can see why some people dislike the characters and dialogue in this game, as it potentially gets in the way of the mood of being lost in this art world. There's just something creative and fun about this nonsensical anything goes kind of world. The player never knows what could show up next, and it would always make sense. And I can see why people say this is one of those game worlds that they can really get lost in. It's definitely distinct, both visually and even gameplay wise. The gameplay of Eve is probably one of those standout things that I remember when I was young and played it. The puzzles were so unique. Each area had its memorable moments, with the theme of interacting with these art pieces to find a solution, giving an umbrella to a painting of a lady missing one, causing it to rain, hooking an object on a picture of a hook to send it elsewhere. In the landscape where most games were just cryptic as hell, or puzzles amounting to just entering a passcode or pushing an object to stand on it, Eve was such a breath of fresh air. I think the area where the player switches between Eve and Gary to solve separate puzzles on different floors, while also interacting through paintings to cause changes to the different areas, to be one of the neatest puzzle areas I've played in a game. And and I always remember getting lost at that part in the original. I think the remake updates it to be a little less confusing while adding more interactions, so it's nothing but a plus. Also, there's some extra Mary dialogue too, from new events and just being able to talk to Mary like I could with Gary. Mary could always use more dialogue, but it still kind of wasn't enough to save her in my eyes. Yeah, okay, I'll talk about Gary and Mary now. I love Gary. I mean, he's just cool. My E playthrough always involves just me going in and doing all the silly things it takes to save him and his memory. That's the ideal E playthrough for me. He's just a nice guy. His hair has like a cool flower root thing design I think is neat. He's into sweets, has a cool jacket, and he's kinda hot. Which for me and my tastes, that's saying something. Like, he's not a robot, a monster, he's just a human. Still, I can see people not caring for his design. But his design is definitely appealing to another group of people. I feel like a lot of people grew up crushing on this dude. But honestly, screw appearances. Gary's like the only character in this game with some actual character. I'm sad the remake doesn't really add much, but I like the conversations of him talking about him going to the gallery, having to assure Eve that he does have friends, but going to the gallery isn't like a typical thing that you do with groups. Or talking about his love for macarons. I mean, there's not much, but it's here. I thought the idea that he has a lighter with him because he's a smoker, and potentially trying to stop as he also carries around candy, which some people use to stop smoking. I think that's neat, because most goddamn horror characters just carry around a lighter for no reason. Something that's kind of lost in the English version of this game is the way Gary speaks. At one point, Eve can ask Gary why he talks like a lady, which is kind of random and doesn't make any sense, but he refers to himself differently in the Japanese version of the game, following more in line with traditional feminine speech patterns in Japan. Reading all this nonsensical gender difference shit kinda makes my brain melt in self-defense of ever having to save such pointless memory into my conscious. But it's kinda just an aspect that can't be translated well. The winning part of all of this is that the creator of Eve, Curry, has stated that Gary is someone who'd like to cross the barriers of gender, and has even drawn Gary in different outfits to represent this, which is honestly just gamer epic. So yeah, Gary's cool. I mean, none of the characters are particularly deep in this game, but darn it, he's likable. Maybe some people can find his interactions with Eve weird, like creeper vibe, giving candy to a kid, and even the idea of wanting to hang out with her after all this. I don't know, maybe that's like a Western stranger danger vibe for me. I think he means well, but maybe the true best ending is when they just don't remember any of this happening. Also, side note, this is so irrelevant, but if I don't say this now, I won't be able to tell anyone about this ever. So there's this character from Hot Shots Golf 4 named Falcon, and I swear this dude is like an alternate dimension Gary. Like when this guy speaks, and you gotta hear this guy's voice, I think that's what Gary sounds like.
Cute outfits, fun game. You should see my apartment.
Honestly, this is my crack ship. Okay, fine. Mary stands. I'll talk about her. I don't know why people like Mary. I mean, I don't hate her, but the thing about Eve is that someone's gotta die. There's no ending where everyone escapes. Mary is just another one of Garatina's paintings coming to life. And I know what y'all are thinking, whoa, Spacey, spoiler alert! And, well, they tell the players this like 30 minutes after meeting her. I was really hoping that aspect of Mary would be improved in the remake. We spend so much time with Gary beforehand that we don't get to know that much about Mary before outright being told, oh no, she's just like everything else in here. That could have been such a good twist with proper build-up. In another world of Eve, we got an extended section of the three interacting and bouncing off each other to be compelling characters. That would have been a dedicated mid-section of the game of the three working together and having fun, with the underlying drama of Mary knowing that she's going to have to betray one of them to be free, and the shock and betrayal of what to do when we find out that she's artificial. But that just isn't here. To me, Mary is the main antagonist of the game. Sure, maybe it's Garatina's work in general, but she's part of that. I don't know why anyone would want to leave with her other than just to see what happens in the other endings. In one route, she takes Eve's flower, only for Gary to protect Eve instead by trading his flower with Mary, only for Mary to then play Love Me Not with it and kill Gary. What the hell? She freaking kills him! And when you do escape with Mary, Eve loses all memory of Gary, but still has the candy he gave her, so Mary, seemingly still having her memory, eats the candy in hopes that Eve will never remember what she did to Gary. Nah, I'm good. And plus, I feel like there's nothing to her character. She's just a little girl that gets excited for things and wants to be real and escape and have friends. Yeah, me f***ing too, kid, but you ain't getting that in the real world either. I wish the remake found a way to make her more likable. A version of Eve where choosing who to save between Gary and another character was actually a very tough decision, to the point where I'd like to replay the game just to save the other character would have been godlike. But I feel like Mary could never be that character. Even if Gary was unlikable, he still lived a life. Mary's just a painting, Guaratina's last one too, so she probably hasn't even been alive for that long. Gary just wants to escape and get back to his life that he's being robbed of. If the choice is between that and Gary, then sorry, it's Gary every time. And no, this isn't Eve Green Edition or whatever, that's fan-made, there's no sacrifice ending. There's no debate, no topics of Gary versus Mary with sides to each, and maybe there doesn't have to be. Perhaps it was never the intention. And also, the whole switching rule thing has never made sense to me lore-wise. Like, why does Mary need to sacrifice someone in order to escape? Where and why is that rule written? How come in the ending where she basically just leaves Eve and Gary to die, she escapes and still gets screwed over? She basically sacrificed 2 people, and that's a double kill. Did that cancel out? She should have been double free. Like, honestly, she was 1 kill away from getting the UAV call. What about everyone else in the gallery? Why is it just Gary and Eve? What do you mean Garatina painted this picture in 6623? What year does this game take place in? And also, maybe I'm just caring too much about this. I feel like people never talk about these characters. Like I've heard of people who just care about Eve for the world and not these people. I guess if Mary has anything going for her, it might be the best theme in the game, though I've always been partial to Gary's. But Mary's theme is iconic. It's the Eve song, even showing up in other games like Yume Tuki. So it's really weird that the song just isn't in the remake. What? The most iconic song in Eve, and it's not even in the remake. This is my only real strike I have against the remake. I mean, the song they used instead is fine, and it does fit Mary a lot. It's good, but it's not Puppet. I don't know, it's probably not a big deal, but I just hope they kept the cool detail about Mary's theme in the original being the only MIDI file in the soundtrack, with the idea that MIDI instruments are fake, to represent Mary being artificial as well. That's so cool. Y'all can speculate in the comments why it's gone. Maybe it's the whole thing with Old Doll and Mad Father, I don't know. I don't even want to play the song because I'll get claimed by like 5 different people that didn't even make it. But I found the music overall to be weird in the remake. I mean, first of all, booting up the game has sound settings placed 60% at music and 90% at sound effects, so that's kinda weird. And while some may say the music is cleaner sounding, I think it's gone too soft. It's hard to say, but something about the music felt more present in the original, just moments where the piano would suddenly come in. I mean, quite a few of these songs are also just free music, so I'm not saying they were edited, but maybe something about the lower quality crusty versions of the original stood out more. This is all hyper nerdy stuff no one will notice, and it's probably just complete placebo or something from my end. But anyways, I did finish the game again. Same ending as always, and as always, the only thought I had was, yep, that sure was Eve. Which kinda sucks. I know it's a remake, and I'm glad it's so faithful to the original, even having the secret bonus dungeon at the end of a second playthrough. It's just that I was hoping they would add more. But I guess it's clear that the creator, Curry, just wanted to refine and make the definitive version of Eve. I just don't know how it sounds when I say I beat this $12 game in 2 hours, and it felt the same as any of my other Eve playthroughs, just with some stuff moved around and different graphics. I understand that there's an appeal to replaying Eve over and over to see different outcomes, which was something I always appreciated about Eve, that it did have alternate scenarios. Like if certain things are done, it's possible to play as Mary, and I think that's rad. But on the other hand, I'm the kind of person that once it gets what I deem the best ending, then I won the game. Which I know is a very emotional, overcritical way of seeing games. But I don't want to replay the game just to get a worse ending. And I know there's a whole bonus dungeon aspect alongside collecting all 150 paintings in the unlockable exhibit to catch Mewtwo or some crap, which entails getting all the endings. The problem is that I already know all the outcomes of Eve. I've already seen them, and Eve is not a particularly interesting game to replay in my opinion, when that mystique has already been taken from me for years. I understand speedrunning, but casual playthrough is just skipping text I've read and puzzles I know the answer to, just for some scenario changes near halfway points in the end. I was really hoping the remake would throw some sort of wrench to old-time players, like how Resident Evil Remake would purposely throw off players who had played the original game, coming in and expecting the same thing. But no, this was basically just Eve. Several upgrades, new rooms with puzzles I mostly enjoyed more, but still very short, and still the same. I always have that moment when I arrive at the sketchbook portion of the game like, oh, I'm at the end already? But with that in mind, I guess I would still call this the definitive version of Eve. Not for the widescreen, not for the zoom feature, not for the graphics or even the new puzzles, but just because people cannot pay money and support the creator. I would love to see Curry work on a new game, because the uniqueness in the design of the puzzles of Eve stands true even now, and the new puzzles thrown in shows that Curry still has it. And I hope in some ways, Eve is more of a start for Curry. With the update to the past done, a possibility of looking towards the future is present. Still, respect to the work that went into this. A full remake like this is no quick task. But I don't know, was an Eve remake even necessary? I guess nothing is necessary in life, and sometimes the unnecessary things can be surprising to live in the world with. If Curry wanted to make an Eve remake, well dang, go for it. And to anyone interested in Eve, whether it be people who never played it or returning fans, then yeah, buy the remake. If anything, just to support the creator. But I won't hate on anyone if they'd rather just play the free version. So yeah, that's Eve alright. In my personal opinion, one of the better older horror RPGs out there, now remade for more modern audiences. Maybe in the years gone forward, my experiences with more modern horror RPGs, typically longer games with battle systems, has definitely made these older games just focused on puzzles a lot more personally uninteresting to me. But I think Eve is worth experiencing for the atmosphere and unique game world that it takes place in, alongside the well-made puzzles. I guess in the end, I really just do wish there was more. I have nothing against short games, especially with my limited time, but Eve stings because it could expand and add all these new cool ideas. There's so much potential for more. But what's here is still good. I think what sticks out about Eve back then, although more crowded, still sticks now. It's an interesting game. I enjoyed my replay through, and although the changes were slight, it was still cool to see. I know other horror RPG games have been getting remakes and ports to Steam, but as weird as it is, the only one that really interested me to go back to was Eve. And it'll be cool to see a potential new audience picking up this game. It's clear a lot of work is being put into it, as it's been getting translated into a ton of different languages. I think one of the best things I can say about Eve is that it's never boring. There's no part of Eve I ever dread replaying through. It's all good throughout. It's a short playthrough, if not played by a completionist, but it's a good one. So, yeah, if somehow any of y'all watching this haven't played Eve or didn't know about the remake, well, here we are. It's definitely still Eve. Hey y'all. This video might just be incoherent ramblings of a game I basically finished my thoughts on like 8 years ago. I can't give a review like this is my first ever playthrough, but still, I hope y'all found something in this video. And I'm gonna start trying to upload more and taking all this a lot of it more seriously. So I hope y'all will stick around. I'm looking at a lot of different things, and there's some big things coming soon that a lot of people have been waiting for me to talk on for real. But yeah, as for me though, I've got places to go. So catch y'all on the next one.